Hey, deserving listeners, a lot of you have been asking me to react to the Shayne interview from Love is Blind on the Vial Files podcast YouTube channel. So let's watch.
What is, more than anything, something that you want to get off your chest?
Okay. I want to say the Natalie stuff and Shayna stuff for like later on right now. I want to get off the whole drug stuff, the ADHD problems that people are going after me for, all that stuff. I want to get that off right away.
Do you use drugs?
Have I?
Have I?
Yes. Have I done them? On the show, I did not.
What type of drugs?
All right, so I think Shayne is reacting to people accusing him of using some sort of stimulant while he was, like cocaine or methamphetamine, while he was in the pods, because people were saying he was quote unquote bouncing off the walls, and he's saying that he wasn't using substances. I tend to believe him. We don't know. He could be lying, but I tend to believe him. And this notion somehow that you can watch someone on a TV show, especially with that presentation, and make a firm determination that they are intoxicated is ridiculous. Especially that presentation. There are other presentations where you can make a pretty strong guess that someone is intoxicated, like if someone's really droopy-eyed and very sleepy. There's a certain look that people will have when they are having an experience with opiate intoxication of a certain level. And I find that people are just like, oh my God, that person's on cocaine. And I'm like, have you seen people on cocaine? Because they don't necessarily look like they're on cocaine. Like, now, if you're on a lot of cocaine and you've taken too much cocaine, maybe there are certain markers that you can look for, but certainly what I saw from him, it didn't have a strong indication. They all could have been on cocaine on the show. You just wouldn't be able to tell.
Any idea that you were at any point on the show doing drugs?
None.
Completely.
That's false.
False.
Mm-hmm.
You're just...
I have, it's obviously not a secret anymore, but I have severe ADHD.
Okay.
And you're sitting in this tiny little room for 3 hours. It's not 30 minutes.
Your nightmare.
It's like 3 hours. And I felt like you have cameras here, cameras here.
He is disclosing that he has already disclosed that he has what he calls severe ADHD. And that's an important detail because, one, there are different degrees of ADHD, and two, there are different presentations of it, there are different manifestations of it. So he is about to describe why the environment in the pods would perhaps aggravate or create a fidgetiness. Let's hear what he says.
Right? And just like staring at you while you're confessing like your love and you're talking about all your deep emotions. It's a very uncomfortable situation, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, regardless, you don't get used to it. I'm much more comfortable when, we were shooting back in Chicago, and that's where you saw the better side of me, those 5 episodes.
I think what he's saying, I don't know, I'm taking a leap, that when he's in the pods, it's a stressful situation, the cameras, you're talking about your emotions, you're trying to meet someone, you are separated from your home and your house and all the things that make you feel comfortable. And then I think what he's saying is that for people with ADHD, generally, it's not always the same, but generally speaking, they will have a hard time utilizing their executive function. There's various different ways to describe that. I'm not a brain scientist, but I have treated people with ADHD, of course. But the thinking is that when you have ADHD, you have a harder time utilizing that system of the brain, which involves working memory and having some conscious control over things, emotional regulation, planning, sifting through a lot of data and making a choice, decision making. It's harder. Think about when you're really tired, for example, and it's just you're in a bad mood, and if someone gave you a really complicated task, it is really difficult. In fact, it might even be impossible. Well, it's analogous. It's obviously not the same thing, but it's analogous to what people with ADHD might feel like all the time. What can happen if there's a lot of data that's coming in, you're in a new situation, you're trying to meet people, there's all these things you got to consider, the cameras, just imagine that. It'd just be a lot of things to keep track of, and when you have all of those things you're trying to keep track of, your executive function will help you. But if you have a deficit in that area, you're going to have a hard time figuring out what you're supposed to do. For example, with a neurotypical person, they have some attention on the cameras and thinking, okay, I don't want to come across like I'm a jerk face. I have some attention on trying to meet someone because I might be meeting the love of my life at this point. I have some attention on the fact that I won't be able to do things later that will make me feel better. I'm kind of stuck in a situation. I have to figure out how to do that. I have some attention spent on empathy and like what's going on with this other person. I have some attention spent on what do I want? Do I even want to be with this person? And the list would go on and on. Well, executive function in the brain allows us to have a greater chance of being able to sift through all those details, hold them in working memory while we work on other things, and able to make better choices that are more likely to meet our needs and more functional. Whereas people who have deficits in that area, it all kind of gets jumbled, and it's just like, wait, what's happening? And sometimes the most salient or most obvious thing or most stimulating thing will be paid attention to, and all the other things will fall away, or the person will just not have an ability to focus on any of it because it's just like overwhelming, or they will maybe even get fidgety sometimes. That the idea is that the person with ADHD is trying to amp up their system. It, again, going with the tired analogy, it's not the same thing. Like, for example, when I'm in my car and I'm really drowsy, usually I'll pull over and take a nap because I just know that's just the only way. But if I don't want to do that, I will try to stimulate myself, right? I will roll down the window. I might even slap myself in the face. I might start singing. I might, I'm just trying to, I might start breathing, like, okay, wake up. Well, it's akin to that. The person with ADHD, their engine, so to speak, is revving really low and they're about to idle. Think of a car at a fuel injection system, and they're trying to amp themselves up, and so they might move around a lot because they're trying to keep their brain active so that they can pay attention and feel in sync with the world. It's so I think that's what he's talking about. Maybe he'll go into some detail on that.
Those next 5 episodes in Chicago, because I could be more of myself, walking around, doing my own thing and having those conversations, whereas I'm just sitting in a room and I was just bouncing off the wall. And of course, I'll be the first to admit, I don't help my anxiety, but I drink, this is 5 shots of espresso right here. So
Hey, what the fuck?
So he says he has anxiety as well. That's different from ADHD. Sometimes there can be anxiety related to ADHD because you realize over time that without a lot of care, you'll tend to mess things up or have things go wrong for you, and so you're always worried that's going to happen. If I don't constantly like keep on track of things, I'm going to mess things up and think something bad will happen. Oh my god! So maybe that. And he's talking about drinking a lot of caffeine. For some people with ADHD, stimulants will help, right? And caffeine can help, depending. With ADHD, also, it's more likely that you're going to not notice the downsides of addiction and just kind of, again, you're just trying to stimulate yourself. You're just trying to find some way of revving up your engine. And of course, this is why psychostimulants work, like Adderall and Ritalin, because that's a stimulant and it will rev up the engine such that your brain is firing more quickly, to put it into layman's terms. And because I'm a layman in that way, I'm not a brain scientist. And then you don't have to stimulate yourself you don't have to do all these other things to try to keep your brain moving. And sometimes that will, without proper treatment, it can lead to people just putting substances in because they're just trying to keep themselves going, or they're not able to pay attention to the downsides of what they're doing to themselves, and it just becomes like this frantic effort to just continue rolling down the road, and they don't ever stop and think, should I be drinking this much caffeine?
Or like if I have too, I can get real hyped up. I'm a decaf. I'm on decaf.
Oh,
Shayne.
Yeah.
Because like the only thing that caffeine does to me is turns me into you.
Yeah. Turns me into me.
Why? Why do you do that to yourself? You drink Red Bulls too?
No, I don't do any energy drinks. No.
All right, so we're hearing from, I believe his name is Nick, the interviewer, is saying that he has ADHD, and for him, caffeine actually makes him very hyper and dysfunctional. And so he's questioning Shayne and saying, like, why do you do that to yourself? And what I'll say is that caffeine has different effects on people, including people with ADHD. For some people, it will have an effect, and for some people, it won't. For some people, it might even be a benefit. Of course, talk with your physician about that if you are having questions about that. So I'm not surprised that we have two, and maybe Shayne will say, yeah, maybe I shouldn't be drinking that much caffeine, but I wouldn't be surprised if he found, or I wouldn't be surprised if someone said, look, if I drink caffeine or I don't drink caffeine, it doesn't really change things in terms of my ADHD, and another person saying the opposite.
Later on.
3 at night?
Mm-hmm. Like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's something I'll work on, but yeah, that's what it's like. We start filming at 7 and we're there to like 3 sometimes, right? So I needed energy to stay up, and I would say I probably did a little too much, but like, yeah, dude, I just have horrible anxious energy. Like sitting in a room like this is like, I'm going to be moving around a lot. That's just who I am.
All right, so he's saying, I have horrible anxious energy. I wonder what that means. I don't know if that is what I was referring to earlier in terms of trying to find stimulation and moving around to get your engine running because you're about to lose concentration because your brain is having a hard time staying on task. So I don't know if that's what he's talking about. He's also mentioning anxiety. And he's also talking about drinking a lot of caffeine. Of course, if you drink a lot of caffeine, you might get jittery and fidgety.
We were reading that. What did that make you feel?
I mean, no offense. Like if people thought I was doing cocaine, I'm mic'd up the whole time. Everyone would have heard me do it. Like, it's wild to think that I was carrying cocaine on me, like, and I was just snorting lines and I was doing all this kind of stuff in the bathroom when I'm mic'd up. Like, they can literally hear you whispering. Every word you do, they hear. And like, how could they not hear me just do that?
I feel like
it's interesting. So according to what he's saying, even when they go to the bathroom, they have a hot mic on them, which is disturbing. I mean, if I was, going to the bathroom, I'd mute that mic. I don't want that footage because you never know what the show's going to do with it, right? So, yeah, that's. I wonder if that. Why would you do that? Why couldn't you turn off your mic?
like we solved the mystery, and that's 5 espresso shots to start your day.
Yeah.
And then 3 more in the afternoon to keep it going. Like, I feel like that does the trick.
Yeah.
I mean, it affects everyone differently.
Yeah. That was the first thing I just want to put to rest. I'm sick of seeing snowflakes in my DM and my comments and everything like that. I was like done with it.
It was definitely a burning question that people wanted to know.
The other thing is, I just don't understand why people care so much. I find that the whole culture around drugs to just be confusing and odd. Until there were legalization of marijuana, it's all this 420 stuff and all this like secret language, and I get it because it's illegal and you could literally go to prison if you're caught with it. But I just found the whole culture around like who's using drugs and when are they using drugs, and it's a drug. It's who cares? Like, if he was on a substance, who cares? Let's say everyone is using cocaine. Who cares? Move on. Somehow it's like, whoa, they're using drugs, man. Like, I don't know. It feels childish. Is that the word for it? People use drugs. People drink alcohol. People drink caffeine. People have nicotine. People have prescription drugs. People take Adderall. People use cocaine. People use opiates. We can talk a long time about the pros and cons of that. Of course, there's a lot of cons to addiction and problematic use, not only for yourself and health, but also your relationships and everything, of course. But I don't know. People use drugs. Get over it.
Yeah, I'm not naive to say I haven't done it before in my past. No, but like it's like no, not on the show. I'm not I'm not going to risk everything for that on the show.
But you're this like,
and along those lines, like they were all drinking. We all saw them drinking, presumably a lot on the show. And there's no talk about that. Like, ooh, he was using alcohol. Alcohol affects us greatly. Why aren't people like, oh my God, they're using alcohol? Is he drunk right now? It's like, yeah, maybe he is drunk. Get over it. It's fine. Like, people drink.
a bit of an enigma on the show. You were the perceived villain in the first 2 episodes, kind of public enemy number 1, because you had that incident with Natalie and Shayne when you found out that Natalie was in the room and it wasn't Shayne, and you did that weird thing with the crayon. You're just trying to beat the shit out of the crayon. It was like a weird.
That was very uncomfortable.
Okay, good. So it sounds like they're going to head into that moment when Shayne mistakenly thought it was Shayne and it was Natalie. A very, I don't know what you say, infamous scene. So let's see what Shayne says.
Watching that, I was very uncomfortable watching that.
What was that like for you?
I'm not going to make an excuse about the situation because how I handled it was horrible. I regret it, but You got to realize we walk into that room.
Okay, so he did say how I handled it was horrible. I believe him. I can imagine watching that if I were him and just being like, ugh, like, because when you watch it, especially because we can see Natalie, he can't see Natalie, and we see Natalie, she's not like freaking out. She's like, wait, what? She's confused and a little hurt, but not extremely. And I think he interpreted it that way because she was being quiet. And then he started to cause more problems because he was getting hostile with her, and then she was more hurt. And so he's about to describe the circumstance. You
hear the tiny little microphone, and people's voices are like, you're just getting to know these people still at this time. And yes, I made a mistake by calling her the wrong name.
Did you think you were set up by production? Because how does it work?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think I thought the same thing. And there was another instance where I thought, wait, that seems like the first time it happened with Natalie, I was like, well, there was no reason to believe. Well, but the second time I remember seeing, I was like, wait, that seemed like a setup. But the first time could have been in that Natalie said, guess who, or something like that, instead of just saying, it's Natalie. And you could imagine the producers telling Natalie to not, reveal who she is at first, and also to maybe even prime Shayne to maybe think that it was Shayna, but it also could have just been a mistake. Let's see what he says.
When I was watching it, people were very quick to be like, "Oh, this guy," early on, the first couple episodes, and then you guys, I was like, I don't know,
mad
just
shit
wait
about you, and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was wrong.
Join the club.
Interesting. Nick is saying that a lot of people were against Shayne in the beginning, and I have limited contact with the vibe of the crowd watching these shows. So partially because I want to avoid spoilers as I'm watching, but also just because I just don't have time. But I do remember seeing some of that. And I will say that I see that with all the reality TV shows that I watch, that there is this tendency to black and white people, meaning that either you love them or you hate them. And I'll see people talking with each other, it's just that they'll be like, well, this person I like and this person I hate, instead of saying like, well, they're all fine. Like, how often have you heard someone talk about a reality TV show cast and someone saying, you know what, they're all like likable people, and some of them have some issues, but they're all generally good people. Like, how often do you hear someone say that about reality TV? As I say that, it just sounds ridiculous, but of course that's how it would be like if it weren't a reality TV show. If you were to go to a party or a family gathering or something, you don't like instantly sit down and like, okay, who am I going to hate and who am I going to like? Who am I going to hate? Who am I going to like? And there are certain markers, I think I'm gathering, that are triggering to people to be like, oh, there's someone we hate. And by the way, I have hypothesized that the way the crowd reacts negatively to particular individuals without very much information in particular, like at the beginning of the Love is Blind season, is a phenomenon of bullying, of group bullying. When we are young and in school, but this doesn't stop when we're older, we know the phenomenon that some people are bullied more often than others because of the way that they just come across. And it could be a number of markers, and it could be particular to even to that school. But the bullies are the people who want, and some of the people are the bullies, meaning they frequently bully. But some people will bully that person even though they don't bully anyone else, because it feels good. It feels good to put someone else down, because temporarily it feels like we're in control, we have power, we're likable in relation to that person. And we as adults have not lost that tendency. When we feel bad about ourselves, we will tend to want to blast someone. And it's Schadenfreude, it's all that, it's a comparison phenomenon. And so when we watch these shows and we have low self-esteem issues and we have insecurities, and we see the crowd, or we guess that someone is likely to be blasted by the crowd, then we pile on because there's not a lot of consequence, because everyone agrees that's the person we're targeting. And I think that Shayne has the markers of someone that would present himself to the internet and the world and have people pile on for him. And he even said, he said, I don't know if I show the clip, but he says, yeah, I said from the beginning, I come across like a tool, but if you get to know me, I'm a likable person. Yeah. I mean, whether or not he's likable or not, the way he comes across is perhaps not the real him, but who is, who comes across in the beginning encompassing their full personality. All right, well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.